Right, let's move to this. The death of 21 teens celebrating the end of exams shone the light on underage drinking and substance abuse. The 2023 school year is over and many pupils have pens down celebrations planned. Now let's discuss how to do this responsibly and the dangers, of course, of substance abuse. And we're joined by Zimasa Mpenyama from Alcohol Harms Reduction. Thank you so much, Zimasa, for joining me this morning. I think first and foremost, we know these pens down celebrations, they happen every single year. What's the main concern this year around these kind of celebrations?
Thank you for having me on the show. These pens down celebrations have become a sort of culture in South Africa, where we see a lot of young people, specifically matriculants, right after matric, that come together to quote-unquote celebrate the ending of the year and then finishing matric, and consume large amounts of alcohol, which we have seen results in many different harmful activities. So one cannot act like we have not seen the Enyobeni tragedy happening. One cannot act like we have not seen instances of young people being brutally raped, being murdered, and part of different dangerous activities. And we report about this every year, we talk about it every year, but there hasn't been a consistent and intentional look at ways in which to curb this kind of behavior around young people. And sometimes we view this as the responsibility of young people to not do this, let's stop them. But I think our look should be at a more systemic level, and we should be looking at ways in which we can regulate the consumption of drinking for young people in South Africa.
And how would you maybe suggest, about going about that, when it comes to policy reforms and changes as well? What would you then as an organization suggest needs to be done to make sure that our young people are kept safe, and that, instances like you say, like in Enyobeni Tavern, of course, we've also seen many other headlines now these last couple of weeks as well, where we've seen accidents on the roads, underage drinking as well. Where do we then, draw the line and say, this is what we need to do policy-wise as well? And, are those policies going to help in this situation?
There is currently some work that is being done. So Digimari Trust and the Alcohol Harms Reduction campaign focuses specifically on policy work that can be done to reduce harmful drinking. And some of these interventions, including the banning of advertising, including increasing the prices of alcohol, including putting more money into psychosocial services that can help young people that are already involved in drug and alcohol abuse, have been seen to work internationally and in international countries. So there are examples internationally where this has worked. So currently in South Africa now, the Department of Social Development has put out for comment a prevention of substance use policy where the public can comment on it. But the important thing about that policy is it's a step in the direction of international regulation, being in the standard of international regulation, where the department is now saying, let's look at alcohol, let's look at substance abuse and regulate it intentionally, have mechanisms in place that can reduce harm, that can reduce the demand for substances, and that can increase the policing for substance abuse. So the policies are there, and including, for instance, in Limpopo, where there's been an instance where the municipality wanted to make the sales up to 12 o'clock, I think, and in the Western Cape as well, there's legislature that's there. So the only thing that's needed is the imperative for government to actually put these policies in place. The policies are there, they just need to be enforced and to be made sure that they comply with the law.
I want to talk about businesses and civil society, but I think let's first start with civil society. What role do you think they need to play here when it comes to the harms of alcohol?
Civil society has a very big role to play. Our role, for instance, as Digimari Trust is around policy work and around pushing for policies that will regulate alcohol consumption. But there are many other civil society organizations that we support and support financially as well that look at supporting communities psychologically with substance abuse, that look at collecting and putting together forums in communities where communities can come together and speak about the dangers of alcohol consumption and speak about the ways in which people experience it. We had a seminar recently where a civil society organization, I can't remember, I think it's in the Eastern Cape, and they were talking about how they are now experiencing an age group between 10 and 12 years old of young boys and girls that are consuming large amounts of alcohol. And there was another one in the seminar where they were talking about pregnant women, where they are supporting pregnant women that are reading themselves off of substance abuse, and alcohol abuse as well. So there's a big role to play. Community leaders, ward councillors, religious leaders, teachers, parents have a very big role to play in creating an environment where young people don't glamorize alcohol and see alcohol as a gateway and the place to go to for a source of entertainment, for a source of being successful in society, because that's how alcohol is advertised as a thing that makes young people successful and cute and nice, and these lovely people that hold drinks on their hands, and young people are susceptible to seeing that as something that they should strive for. So I think all of society has a role to play in making sure that young people view life and entertainment differently than just the avenue through alcohol.
It might sound so simple, Zimaza, but you and I both know there's a lot of work that will need to go into that to make sure that, this culture of alcohol abuse is, something of the past here in South Africa. And hopefully we can get to that point at some point in time. But let's talk about the role. You mentioned the role parents, churches, and all of these other organizations need to play when it comes to this. But let's also talk about the businesses, especially the smaller businesses, the taverns, etc. You mentioned in your Benia as well, where we see that, they sell alcohol to young kids. You mentioned the 10 to 12 age group as well. That's becoming a huge problem. Where do they need to come in here to also say that this is where we draw the line? Doesn't matter if we're not making money out of this, particular sale, but it is the wrong thing to do morally, and it's also illegal. So where do they need to also play a massive role in curbing this?
I think as a society, we need to come to a point where we view the health and well-being of society above profits. And this is something we've had major discussions with about the Department of Social Development with as well, and many different government departments, that in thinking about business and profits and making a livelihood, we should what is the cost of social well-being? What is the cost of public health? And so I would say to local tavern owners, let's stick together and kind of find solutions where we can try and put the cost of what you gain personally below what is healthy for society. So if you have a tavern and you are closing at 2 a.m. and you see that there are young people in there, there should be bouncers or people at the door that make sure that young people are not there. People that are visibly young and that you can see are young. They should be looking at IDs. They should be making sure that they are not selling to young people, because we've seen how harmful, not only at Enyobeni, even at our local places where we live in the townships, in different local areas, young people are given access to taverns and given access to places of entertainment where they buy large sums of alcohol. And because of their young minds that are not fully developed yet, the behaviors that come after such consumption are very dangerous. So I think it is a collective responsibility for all of us to try and curb this behavior, and that includes tavern owners by putting in strict restrictions on who has access to their establishments. And
maybe just a last word from you as alcohol harms reduction. what's the final word you'd like to say for the government, but also the private sector and all of the role players involved here when it comes to protecting our young minds, like you also just said, against alcohol?
I think our role as DG Marie Trust is to say that curbing the abuse of alcohol around young people is a policy question, and it is a question that will need intentional and radical thinking from government and all sectors of society. We shouldn't look at it as an individual endeavor where I myself individually as Zimasa will stop drinking and that will do something. Yes, it may do something for myself, but will it do something society-wide? So for us to change the narrative in terms of society, we must change our thinking as policymakers, we must change our thinking as parents, we must change our thinking as people who have a responsibility for public health, and that includes all sectors of government. So let's think radically, let's think in ways that will shift society so that the young minds that are there can flourish for the future. There's so much that needs to happen in South Africa and change, and it's young people that will do that. And so for us to protect young people, we need to protect them from the harms that are there from alcohol.
And of course also set the example for those young minds as well as the grown-ups of this country, basically. Zimaza Mpenyama, thank you so much for your time from Alcohol Harms Reduction.